This is where the controversy began. Stretching around this bowl are sand dunes as far as the eye can see, in a huge circle. And on the bottom of the bowl is the now dry Lake Mungo. Magnificent. And look at this amazing sight. It's just like a lunar landscape. And what about this stratigraphy? Very small layers laid down very quickly. I wonder what caused this. And look at this fascinating erosion. This soft, friable, sandy clay. How long did this take to form? And just as importantly, what about this coloration in the middle layer? Ferrous oxide. How did this happen? This huge dump of pure white sand in the middle of the Western Plains, stretching around the bowl of Lake Mungo. Pure white and uncontaminated. How did this sand get here? There was a dramatic event to explain all this extinction. It was the Lake Mungo magnetic reversal. ANU scientist Barbetti discovered this in the 60s, and the evidence was within the rocks around Lake Mungo. When rocks heated and then cools, it retains a magnetic signature of the environment at that stage. It was found that at Lake Mungo there had been a 120-degree swing in the magnetic axial dipole, and the field strength was 10 times of the prison era. The effects must have been catastrophic.
Well, it's interesting that you say that there are magnetic reversals found at the site, because that indicates a change in electrical currents. Basically, you don't get a magnetic field without an electric current.
Oh, that's a precursor too.
So that's, yeah, that's an indicator that we're looking at an electrical phenomenon. And when you talk about auroras, they of course are one of the grandest electrical phenomena that we see on Earth. And we know that auroras are connected with activity on the sun, but we do have very strong evidence now from research being done in modern plasma physics that around the world were witnessed auroras which were thousands of times more powerful than present-day aurora. And we can say that with fair certainty, because when you get that kind of energy, the plasma takes on forms which we don't see in the sky today, but which are very characteristic of what we see in plasma labs.
Oh, okay.
So the change in currents, the change in magnetic field could have been associated with these super powerful auroras.
Amongst the early Aboriginal tribes, great fear was held of the Southern Lights, or Aurora Australis. And the Gango close to Canberra thought it signified that at some great distance a number of blacks were being slaughtered. The Kuanai of the Gippsland region would shout such words as "Send it away, do not let it burn us up." The aurora filled the whole space between the earth and the sky, precipitating floods, collective madness, and the final departure of the Creator from earth. Men went mad with fear and speared each other, fathers killing their children, husbands their wives, and brethren each other. Then the sea rushed over the land, and nearly all mankind was drowned. Mungan, the Creator, left the earth and ascended the sky, where he still resides.
Now, there have been peer-reviewed published papers on this phenomenon of super powerful auroras, so we're not just making this up, so to speak. And the way we can test this is by looking at the kind of imagery that not only the Aborigines but also all prehistoric peoples around the world recorded by chipping into stone or their artwork on rock.
These petroglyphs, I believe.
The petroglyphs, yeah. That's right. And the interesting thing is that we've found that the shapes, these weird shapes which have been interpreted as stick men or even as astronauts, you know, because of the strange helmet-like protuberances and horns and so on.
Virginia and...
That's right. The fact that we can tie these in now to these high-energy discharge phenomena in plasma labs means that it gives a very strong argument for the fact that the ancients witnessed not only the super powerful auroras, but lived through a time when something strange was going on in the solar system.
Let's go to Mutawinchi National Park, just near Wilcannia, and find out exactly what they did see. And look at the local guardians of the area. A remote cave in the middle of New South Wales. How long have these figures been here? 2,000 years? 10,000 years? Some even conjecture 60,000 years. But look at them. This cave is astounding. You look up from the bush and suddenly you're hit by these extremely weird figures. Or stickmen. What on earth do they mean? So you're saying, well, just to make sure I've got this right, that the shapes that they carved into the rock resembled the shapes you're seeing in these plasma discharges in laboratories.
Yes, and the interesting thing is that as this high energy discharge takes place in the laboratory, the shape changes over time.
Right.
Very quickly in the laboratory, but if you consider something on the scale of the Earth or an aurora, it takes place over a more extended period of time. And some of the shapes were very distinctive. One of them is known as the squatter man, which is a figure with the arms upraised like this at right angles and the legs also splayed at right angles.
Yeah.
And the strange thing is that almost without exception around the world you find that these dots are drawn between the elbow and the knee. Yeah. And this, of course, makes no sense according to the way we look at the world today. But in the plasma lab we find that this is precisely what you see. The figure with the arms, apparent arms upraised and the legs out at right angles. The plasma toroid, which is seen as two circles between the knees and the elbows. And also something that looks a bit like a head or a shape at the top.
So we've actually got photographs of this phenomenon in the laboratory.
Yes.
And tell me, well, the thing here is, with a magnetic reversal or whatever caused this electromagnetic aurora, what effects would be happening on Earth once it reaches a certain point? Perhaps you could tell us the certain point that it becomes, let's say, critical.
Okay, well, at those kinds of energies, when the discharge is that powerful...
And they do discharge.
Yeah, it is an electrical discharge. It's a cosmic discharge, if you like. The central part of this apparition generates X-rays, which can be lethal.
Yeah.
So that people would have recognised that this object in the sky had a profound effect on animals and themselves. And also, if the discharge to the ground was sufficiently powerful, you would get super lightning bolts, which are quite destructive and can actually sculpt the landscape to some extent.
So that actually tears Earth away from the landscape and pushes it up in the air? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We've seen this in a small scale where some super bolts have hit the ground and they carve channels, sinuous channels.
Yeah, I've seen one on golf courses.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you imagine that scaled up thousands, tens of thousands of times, you can imagine that whole river courses could have been sculpted in moments.
Okay. And even, I think you were showing me the other day what it does on interplanetary models, for instance Mars. You believe it carves out these craters, and you have some evidence of that sort of effect?
Yes, well, one of the features of electrical scarring is that it can form either sinuous patterns or it can form circular craters.
But that depends on what stage it's at? Or?
It depends on whether the Earth is acting as a positive electrode or a negative electrode.
Okay, and it all comes.
But even today we can have what's called positive lightning or negative lightning, and the effects are different. This is something not many people understand, but the scarring or the cratering, the surface damage with the different charged surfaces, whether it's positive or negative, are different.
Okay.
And in the case of a negatively charged surface, what tends to happen is that the lightning or the arc strikes, creates a circular crater, and then it leaps, it hops about. And quite often it usually hops to the nearest high point. So what you find on the Moon, for instance, is that you get the circular crater, a large one, and then perched on the rim at the high point is another circular crater, neatly cut into the rim of the larger crater.
Okay.
You never see the reverse. So this is sort of a characteristic of an electrical crater. And it's a puzzle that's been sort of pushed aside by astronomers and geologists, because there was a lot of argument 100 years ago about whether the craters on the Moon were volcanic in origin, like a burst bubble, or whether they were impacts. And both sides had good arguments why it wasn't the other side's explanation. And finally it was up to a show of hands, and the impact people won. Yeah. Like so much of science.
But in fact you think there's very little evidence of meteorites actually finding bits of meteorites on.
They do not create craters like an electric crater.
Yeah, and these are flat bottom normally.
Often flat bottom with a melted surface, and often with terraces. And on the Moon we do find some of the large craters with terraces, and the terrace itself has a melted surface, but the rock face beside it doesn't.
Okay.
Now, you can't create that with an impact.
So what caused this magnetic reversal at Lake Mungo? Was it a comet, a coronal mass ejection, or perhaps a chaotic solar system? I talked to Ted Bryan from Wollongong University, and he had some very interesting information on Rick Firestone's theories on the demise of the Clovis Indian and the megafauna in North America. Is there some parallels with Lake Mungo and Lake Victoria?
Firestone believes that a large one came in and hit the Laurentian ice sheet about 12,000 years ago. And it's the time of the Younger Dryas. It melted so much water from that ice sheet that it flooded the Atlantic Ocean, and it was a trigger to go back into a cooling period. And it also might have been the dust and everything else, the firing caused by this. But he can find across North America, it wiped out the Clovis Indian culture, which was developed at the time. It just terminated.
Yeah.
And he thinks it wiped it out. He also finds other physical evidence. He finds this, what he calls a black mat. It's an organic mat, and it covers things. And you can find it on low-lying areas and open surfaces, but he always finds this mat of organic material. And he doesn't know whether it's the settled out of the fire burnt product of the firing of North America, was carried in the atmosphere. It doesn't know what it is, but it determines. There's a lot of
mysteries left, isn't there?
Well, if you find this mat, you know you've hit the boundary.
Right.
And it's with the Younger Dryas, and it's the time the Clovis Indians got wiped out.
And precisely at the termination of the Clovis Indian culture and the extinction of the megafauna, the Carolina Bays lunette system was formed in North America. This is very similar to the Murray-Darling lunette system. In the Carolina Bays, Rick Firestone found high levels of iridium. hematite spirals and carbon spirals. These were attached to the death of the megafauna. Did something like this happen in Australia and possibly at the same time? Now I'm thinking of some practical possibilities on Earth. I mean, I was thinking I was showing you the photos of the Carolina Bays in the US, where there's literally thousands of craters, different size, all next to each other, interface between river courses. Do you think that's possibly an electrical effect?
It could be. On the moon, for instance, there are chains of craters.
Yeah.
And there is one in particular on the moon which is a chain of elongated elliptical craters.
Okay.
And so it could be that same kind of effect. The craters on the moon are not caused by impacts or by volcanic activity.
Yeah.
And crater chaining is a characteristic of electrical discharge machining too.
And in fact, I think you've shown me pictures of studies done on metal, taking high voltage discharges onto the metal, and it does cause craters.
Yes.
It's very similar to what's on
Yes.
the Mars moon.